Beyond intuitive physics, the centrality of slipability. Sometimes this capacity is referred to as an intuitive physics. Intuitive physics is certainly an important ingredient in the triggering patterns needed for the organism's comfortable survival. John McCarthy gives the example of someone able to avoid moving a coffee cup in a certain way because they can anticipate how it might spill and coffee might get all over their clothes. Note, this is what is computed, and it's a set of alternative, rough description for what might happen rather than one exact trajectory. This is the nature of intuitive physics. However, as I stated earlier, there is much more required for symbols to have meaning than simply that their triggering patterns yield an intuitive physics. For instance, if you see someone in a big heavy leg cast and they tell you that their kneecap was acting up, you might think to yourself, that's quite a nuisance, but it's obviously nothing compared to my friend who has cancer. Now, this connection is obviously caused by triggering patterns possessed by symbols representing health problems, but what does that have to do with the laws of motion governing objects or fluids? Precious little. Sideways connections like this, having nothing to do with causality, are equally much of the essence in allowing us to place situations in perspective, to compare what actually is with what, to our way of seeing things, might have been or might even come to be. This ability, no less than intuitive physics, is a central aspect of what meaning is. This way, that any perceived situation has of seeming to be surrounded by a cluster, a halo of alternative versions of itself, of variations suggested by slipping any of a vast number of features that characterise the situation, seems to me to be at the dead centre of thinking. Not much AI work seems to be going on at present to mirror this kind of slipability. There are some exceptions. Jamie Carbonell's group working on metaphor and analogy at Carnegie Mellon is an example. Some other former members of Shank's Yale group have turned toward this as well, such as Michael Dyer and Margot Flowers at UCLA and Jerry DeJong at Illinois. I would also include myself as another maverick investigating these avenues. Cognitive psychologists such as Stanford's Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman of the University of British Columbia have done some very interesting studies of the certain types of slipability, although they don't use that term. This is an issue that I covered in some detail in Gödel-Escherbach, under various headings of slipability, subjunctive instant replays, almost situations, conceptual skeletons and conceptual mapping, alternaty, a term due to George Steiner, alternative, that's called, and so on. If we return to the metaphor of the ant colony, we can envision these symbols with halos as hyper-teams of ants, many of whose members are making what appear to be strange forays in random directions, like flickering tongues of flame spreading out in many directions at once. These tentative probes, which allow the possibility of all sorts of strange lateral connections as from kneecap to cancer, have absolutely no detrimental effect on the total activity of the hyper team. In fact, quite to the contrary, the hyper team depends on its members to go wherever their noses lead them. The thing that saves the team, what keeps it coherent, is simply the regular patterns that are sure to emerge out of a random substrate when there are enough constituents. Statistics, in short. Occasionally, some group of wandering scouts will cause a threshold amount of activity to occur in an unexpected place, and then a whole new area of activity springs up, a new high-level team is activated, or to return to the brain terminology, a new symbol is awakened. Thus, in a brain, as in an ant colony, high-level activity spontaneously flows around, driven by the myriad lower-level components' autonomous actions.